Hello?
Hey, it's Charlotte Police. Are you still in the library?
We are still in the library in 133A. The students were scared to come out because we heard loud noises and they were saying to come out with our hands up, and we're very scared.
I called so many times. I was calling for the UNCC. My daughter is at UNCC and she's still hiding under a desk.
Okay. Did she tell you where she's hiding, ma'am?
She told me that she's inside one of the classroom. And they have sofas against the door.
We heard 5 shots. We don't know how many shooters.
Okay, did it happen in his classroom?
Did it happen in your classroom? Yes.
Okay, did it...
Or immediately outside.
Okay, in the hallway?
In the hallway? We're not sure. We thought it was a classroom.
I don't know. I'm calling from inside the UNC Charlotte campus. There's an active shooter situation, and we are in one of the buildings that have a room full of students.
Okay, do you know the address of the building where you are?
We are in the Friday building in room 385. These doors don't lock. I had a student that went out to make a copy, and he came running in. How many shots? He saw there were people bleeding.
He saw people bleeding?
How many shots? Yeah.
Do they look like... Okay, stay on the line. I'm going to connect us to medic. Do they look like they need medic?
I don't need a medic in my room. We're kind of trapped in here. Look, we need help. We're in a classroom. And I
understand, and we've got multiple calls out there. We're definitely getting someone out there as soon as possible.
Okay.
Hi, my sister goes to UNC Charlotte. She says there's a shooting on her campus and that 3 people have been shot.
Okay, ma'am. Where is she currently right now?
She says she's in class. She goes to UNC Charlotte.
What room is she in?
I don't know.
Can you ask her and tell her to stay where she is?
The UNCC emergency management team issued an alert when the shooting started, indicating shots were heard around Kennedy Hall, and students were instructed to run, hide, fight, and to secure yourself immediately. One group of students found shelter inside of a classroom, smartly securing the door with a belt.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
The lead investigator, Detective Brian Cole, from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, interrogated Ed after he was brought into custody. However, the FBI also aided in the investigation. Ed gave a full confession, telling the detectives, quote, "I just went into a classroom and shot the guys." It was absolutely chilling. Ed continued saying that he had been planning the shooting for some time. Several months, in fact. He detailed how he purchased the weapon and researched mass shootings, particularly the Sandy Hook shooting. Ed elaborated that he narrowed down his target to 3 locations, ultimately choosing UNCC because he was familiar with the Kennedy building, and more specifically, the very classroom he shot. It was shocking how blunt Ed was with his answers. When asked about his motive, Ed explained that he was angry and disgruntled about the debt he accrued after borrowing thousands of dollars for school. He claimed that the shooting was a cry for help. Ed felt like he was drowning in debt and couldn't get out. It was the most ridiculous and pathetic excuse. No amount of money is worth taking innocent lives. Ed's apartment was located at the 400 block of East 36th Street in the North Davidson neighborhood of Charlotte, commonly known as NODA. The third-floor apartment was searched at about 8 p.m. on the evening of the shooting. They recovered several items of evidentiary value, including a laptop, 3 handgun magazines, 6 boxes of ammunition, a magazine loader, and paper targets. After the shooting ceased, police stood guard over the Kennedy building and exams were immediately canceled, with students being given the option to retain their current grade in the class without taking an exam, or they would take their exams online. The 2 deceased students were pronounced dead at the scene. The 4 injured students were rushed to the hospital. 2 of the injured had life-threatening injuries, while the other 2 sustained more minor injuries. They were all treated at Carolina's Medical Center Main Hospital in Charlotte. The injured students included 20-year-old Sean DeHart, 23-year-old Emily Haupt, 20-year-old Rami Al-Ramadan, and 19-year-old Drew Pescaro. Rami was shot 3 times, but hit twice. His father flew from Saudi Arabia, where Rami was from, to Charlotte to be with his son as soon as he heard the news. Rami was in his first semester at UNCC when he was shot. He sustained 1 gunshot wound to his stomach, but thankfully the bullet didn't go all the way through. He was also shot in the arm, although Rami didn't even realize it until he reached the hospital. Drew, a writer for the school's newspaper, was shot in the back. The bullet traveled all the way through. Riley Howell was only 21 years old when he was murdered. Born to parents Thomas Howell Jr. and Natalie Henry Howell, Riley had 2 sisters and a brother. Riley attended Tuscola High School, but graduated from T.C. Robertson High School. After high school, he went to A.B. Technical College, and then transferred to UNCC when he was a junior. An adventurous young man, Riley loved the outdoors and enjoyed such outdoor activities as climbing mountains and trees, kayaking, and canoeing. He was passionate about learning and had a wonderful sense of humor. Riley had a variety of interests, ranging from an interest in plants and animals to a fondness for fitness and working out. Perhaps his greatest interest was the movie Star Wars. His love for all things Star Wars was so deep that his family and friends held his celebration of life on May the 4th, which is commonly known as Star Wars Day. Riley's heroism on that day of the shooting even reached the production company for Star Wars, Lucasfilm, who named Riley as a Jedi Master. They even mentioned him in the book Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, the Visual Dictionary. During his young life, Riley worked several different part-time jobs, including the corner kitchen. He liked those jobs because he enjoyed cooking, and loved eating even more. His family recalls that Riley loved making fried chicken in the cast-iron skillet. They loved it too, even though he sometimes burned it. Friends of his remember Riley as the kid who could eat an entire large pizza and still be hungry for more. He always put others before himself. Not just people, but animals and even the planet were his main concern. At the time of his death, Riley was in a relationship with Lauren Westmoreland, whom he deemed his soulmate. Riley's spirit lives on, and he will never be forgotten.
I want the defendant to know that, though he had no right, he has hurt and damaged physically, emotionally, and psychologically my family and others, but that Riley and Reed's light, goodness, and protective love is what reigns supreme in our hearts.
19-year-old Ellis Reed Parlier was born on October 2, 1999 in Pineville, North Carolina, the beloved son of Brian and Julie Parlier, and brother to one sister. He was known to all as Reed. In 2017, he graduated from the Central Academy of Technology and Arts in Monroe, North Carolina. There, Reed studied in the Information Systems Academy. He continued to pursue a degree in computer science and dreamed of becoming a video game developer. Reed was a giver. He volunteered his time tutoring middle school students. Known for his kind-heartedness, Reed was described by his school instructors as motivated and independent. Though he was on the quiet side, Reed was very funny and always made others laugh. After his death, a scholarship was developed in Reed's honor. Reed will be deeply missed by everyone.
Reed was a loving, intelligent, quiet, kind, witty, and caring soul. His life was ended by a selfish, cowardly, soulless waste of a human being.
The University of North Carolina at Charlotte, or UNCC, was established in 1946. The university employs about 1,400 staff members and provided education for approximately 30,000 students. The school colors are green, gold, and white, and the nickname is the 49ers. The university is home to 18 varsity sports.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter
mass casualty incidents.
active shooter. Reports of an active shooter.
Active shooter mass casualty incidents.
Ed was born on June 6, 1996 in Texas. He attended Mansfield High School in Mansfield, Texas before moving with his father to North Carolina in 2014. Ed's mother passed away from breast cancer in December of 2011. Before her death, she was a paraprofessional for the Mansfield School District. In the early years especially, Ed displayed no red flags that we have been accustomed to with so many shooters we've covered. There was no criminal record in Texas, though Ed was, understandably so, shattered by his mother's untimely death. When his father had the opportunity, he eagerly accepted a new job as an auditor for the Charlotte City government. He wanted a fresh start for both himself and his son, and felt Ed would do better in a new area. In 2014, his father sold the family home, and they moved. At the time of the shooting, Ed had an older sister who was living in Baltimore. She studied psychology at Texas Woman's University, where she graduated in 2016. Little else is known about her. Ed's grandfather reported that Ed was diagnosed as autistic when he was about 3 or 4, and that he was socially reserved. Ed was incredibly intelligent and taught himself to speak both Portuguese and French from a program that his grandfather purchased him. Ed dreamed of living in South America. Ed wasn't known as being very outgoing. Rather, it was the opposite. He was an introvert and kept to himself. His grandfather says that he often tried to get Ed into sports like baseball and golf, but he simply wasn't interested. He didn't enjoy athletics. In fact, he wasn't captivated by guns or shooting either. At least, not according to his grandfather. He claimed that Ed was repulsed by the gun culture and believed it to be far too easy to obtain a firearm in the United States. Ed enrolled at the Central Piedmont Community College from the fall of 2015 through spring of 2018, studying for an associate's degree in science. In the fall of 2018, Ed transferred to UNCC and changed majors to study history. In the spring of 2019, he was only enrolled in 3 classes. The class that Ed opened fire upon was one of the courses that he was enrolled in. Ed attended the first few classes, but withdrew shortly thereafter. Professor Adam Johnson recalled Ed from class, describing him as a typical student. He engaged in class and was a student that asked questions, answered questions, and participated like anyone else. On the other hand, a classmate described Ed as quiet, rarely speaking up with the exception of the occasional outburst where he blurted out random statements that made him appear upset. On February 14, 2019, Ed withdrew from UNCC. Altogether, and around the same time, he legally purchased his firearm, and it was reported that he visited a gun range prior to the shooting. Despite this, his grandfather still believes that Ed had never fired a gun in his life before the shooting, and it was clear that he wasn't obsessed with guns. At least, he gave no outward appearances of such. Ed had little to no social media presence. His attorneys described Ed as a loner, one who self-isolated and was incapable of socializing with others. He distanced himself from his peers, which is certainly a red flag, or a common trait of most shooters we've covered, though in no way an automatic indicator of someone who will ultimately commit one of the worst acts against humanity. After the shooting, Ed was placed in the Mecklenburg County Jail, where he was held without bail. The first court appearance was set for 2 days after the shooting, Thursday, May 2nd at 1:30 p.m. Ed waived his right to be there in person. Therefore, a public defender appeared on his behalf. Ed was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of having a gun on an educational property, 1 count of discharging a firearm on educational property, 4 counts of attempted murder, and 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon intending to kill. He was indicted on all counts. During his sentencing hearing, Ed tried to claim that he had been consuming substances during the month of April that year. However, he didn't clarify what he was allegedly taking. Ed's father was present at the sentencing and listened on as Ed's attorney described him as suffering with autism, and were he to be given the death penalty, it would be cruel and unusual punishment because of it. For their part, Prosecutors noted that Ed never told his father about withdrawing from classes months before the shooting, and as a result,